We want to get into some more and break down some more of these races in states like New York, in states like Florida, as voters are still heading to the polls today. We know polls are going to be closed in New York at about 9 p.m. Eastern. Let's talk about some of these New York races even further. I'm being joined by Washington Post political reporter Dave Weigel. And Dave, good to see you yet again. It's another Tuesday this summer in August. We brought you on just last week to talk about those races. New York is really interesting. We were just speaking to one of our Fox correspondents talking about how redistricting really threw a lot of these congressional districts in flux, pitting incumbent Democrats against each other. Give us a flavor of what we have in store tonight. Dave, I do believe you are muted there.
Sorry. You're referring first to the race in the 12th district in Manhattan. That was a decision by the special master appointed by this court that overruled the Democratic map to combine northern Manhattan into one district where it had been separated for decades into one on the west side, one on the east side. And that forced Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler, two incumbents who have been there for 30 years, force them into the same district. That's become probably the bitterest race of the day between people who know each other well already. There's a third candidate race, Suraj Patel, who has challenged Maloney in two different primaries. She is seen to be fading in the final few days. It's been kind of erratic in how she's talked about Nadler, how she's talked about Joe Biden.
That's right. Maloney has taken a very interesting approach, I thought. She's been quite outspoken about why she thinks Joe Biden should not run again. Do you think that's doing her a disservice of this race?
That was one mistake. It was more the way that she handled it. So she had an advantage at the start of the race. She represented more of this district, more of the new district in her previous seat. And she'd beaten, again, this challenger, Suraj Patel, twice. The Manhattan part of the district looked strong for her. But you're right, there was a debate a few weeks before the primary, before early voting, where each candidate was asked if they thought Biden should run in 2024. It's a tough question for Democrats, even for some who like him. And she said she did not believe he was running. She then went on another television show to clean it up, said that she still doesn't think he is, but she hopes he does. It's almost not worth chasing the rabbit all the way down the hole on this. I mean, she had a complicated answer, but after that was clearly kind of flailing as Nadler attacked her. And an important issue that emerged, again, one Patel had brought up in her previous races, is that she, I think like a lot of liberal Democrats for a little while, speculated that autism might be caused by vaccination. She wanted information on this. She didn't act for too long on that, but the fact that she did 15 years ago became a problem for her in this race in a way it never had before. After COVID, after it became very important to a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals, people to get vaccinated. So she got kind of wrapped around the axle on that issue. She had problems enunciating what she meant about Joe Biden. At the end of the campaign, she was calling Nadler senile, which he disagreed with. And really, the votes need to be counted. But one thing you heard from Democrats that she under pressure started to flail in that race.
But this is so interesting, too, because, from the outside looking in, they've been in Congress, for upwards of 30 years. They sit on very powerful committees as the chairman and chairwoman, and they are friends. And we've seen this kind of play out. I'm thinking of the Michigan primary between those two Democratic incumbents, Haley Stevens, beat Andy Levin. And so is this kind of fracturing some of the relationships in some of these key districts in states like Michigan, like New York, against Democrats that were once friends? Are they still going to be friends?
Yeah, and it happens every 10 years. This also happened in New York with Sean Patrick Maloney, the chair of the DCCC, fully intended to run in his current district. After the map was thrown out, a new map was created. He lived in the 17th district, the same one as Mondaire Jones, a freshman member of Congress, who he was very happy to work with, the first black gay member of Congress. Mondaire Jones was blindsided, moved to a different part of New York City, actually, away from Westchester County and from the district he was in, moved away from that. That definitely fractured relationships. Democrats were really surprised and disappointed by how hard this got after, like a lot of people, a lot of legislators say, they submitted maps that were pretty favorable to the party. They got approved, and the court threw them out.
Yeah, and we're also seeing, like you were kind of mentioning, some of these hardline progressive Democrats against some of these more moderate centrist Democrats. And that leads me to the New York 10th Congressional District between Dan Goldman and, like you were saying, Mondaire Jones. Where did Dan Goldman come from? Who is he, and what are his chances?
Well, Goldman is the very personally wealthy attorney who is best known, I think, if you watch cable TV, especially for his role in Donald Trump's second impeachment trial, a case where the burden of proof on the Democrats is very high. They need to get 67 votes to ban Trump from running off for us again. They didn't get there, but you saw Goldman get a lot of attention, a lot of respect for how he handled that. He was running for attorney general briefly last year when this district was created. Again, surprise, people didn't expect there to be a new district that was connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn. He jumped into that race and started to spend a lot of money. And if you've been in New York in the last month or anywhere around it, Goldman's ads are everywhere. Goldman's ads talking about Trump, talking about the threat to democracy. He was in a race, though. I mentioned Mondaire Jones, who moved from upstate New York to this district. A race with him and a bunch of other progressives. So Yulia New, a New York Assemblywoman who fairly far left wing, supported by the Working Families Party. A few other Democrats who had a kind of a claim on this district and the strategy. Goldman jumped in and complicated that. And when he got the endorsement of the New York Times, it was a controversy in this race in a way that endorsement may not be a controversy in every election. The fact that the board of the newspaper didn't seem that enthused with Goldman. He had kind of stumbled on some questions about abortion. And yet the paper endorsed him anyway. The progressives in that race started to say, this is favoritism. This is a candidate who's trying to buy the election, and the Times editorial board is letting him get away with it. So you saw in the final week a lot of bitterness between the non-Goldman candidates, but nobody dropping out. Two different sets of candidates had press conferences urging people to vote for somebody who was not Dan Goldman, but none of them consolidated the vote, and that could be a problem. A lot of progressives I talked to have worried in a very safe seat, one that Biden won about 3-1, 4-1, that they might nominate somebody more moderate than a lot of Democrats. So he doesn't support Medicare for all, doesn't support a Green New Deal, liberal in most of the country, but not in this part of New York.
Yeah, that's so interesting because polls close in about 2 hours' time. Is it asking a lot for New Yorkers to come to the polls yet again? They already did so earlier this summer. Why are there two primary contests this summer?
Well, like a lot of answers here, that comes back down to the court. The court, state's highest court, threw out the district maps. It didn't throw out the assembly maps. It let the primaries continue for governor, for statewide offices, but it said there was not enough time to hold primaries in June on these new lines. Candidates need to refile. Candidates need to get petition signatures, things like that. And so they stacked these primaries so that one happened in June, the other one is happening today. And that's unusual for New York. New York used to have September primaries, some of the last in the country, that used to have this split. Progressives in the state legislature were very proud of unifying these elections, having them on the same day. But the result is that a lot of New Yorkers are not used to voting in August. A lot of New Yorkers are out of town, even though it's fairly easy to get an absentee ballot. Turnout has been fairly low in a place that provides a bulk of the Democratic majority in the House. So you might have people come to Congress with a fairly low number of votes, fairly modest amount of support in these primaries just because of how strange the election was and how everyone had to refile at the last minute.
Dave, last point I want to make about New York, because turnout was some of my questions. I was wondering, what that's going to look like. But a key New York City political figure, Bill de Blasio, was in the mix in the New York 10th. He withdrew from that race. What do you think he's going to be doing tonight?
Not a lot of people are asking that question. You're the first person I've heard ask it. He's a fairly spent force in New York City politics. He left office with fairly low approval ratings and didn't even declare who he voted for. So de Blasio has not had the role in shaping the party's future that maybe he wanted. He wasn't really a factor in that race. He dropped out because it was very clear to Blasio he was not getting above 3 or 4%, despite having won two pretty decisive landslide victories as mayor.
Okay, Dave, last question, because we're going to be speaking to one of our reporters who's in Florida in the next couple of minutes here. But just lastly, what are you going to look for in Florida specifically tonight, too?
I'm looking at who wins this Democratic nomination for governor against Ron DeSantis, but also which Republicans win in the new districts or the redrawn districts that DeSantis personally supervised to become safe for Republicans after being swing seats for years. And that's the 4th district around Jacksonville. That is the 7th district, it's a little bit outside of Orlando, and the 13th district in Pinellas County, St. Petersburg, that area of the state. There are some very America First candidates, the kind of people who would probably not win in swing seats, who are going to come out of those races. A lot more in the mold of Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm kind of looking for that in Florida tonight.
All right, Washington Post's Dave Weigel. As always, we appreciate your time. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you.